He didn't recognize her at first. The elegant woman sitting in the corner of the cafe, dressed in a tailored cream suit, looked nothing like the girl he had once held under the rain, whispering dreams they thought would last forever. But when she lifted her eyes, and he saw the same soft brown gaze that had once made him forget the world, his heart stopped. And she froze too. Because sitting across from her wasn't just a man she'd loved, it was the one she had lost because of fate. A struggling single father now, with tired eyes, a frayed jacket, and a little girl who looked exactly like the life they'd once dreamed of together. The morning had started like any other for Daniel. Cold air seeping through the cracks in the apartment window, the weak smell of instant coffee, and the soft hum of his daughter, Lily, getting ready for school. She was 6, bright, curious, full of questions about a world that had been unfair to them both. "Daddy, can we get pancakes today?" she asked, tugging his sleeve as he struggled to fix the button on her worn coat. He smiled faintly. "If we can find a place with a special deal, maybe." Her eyes lit up as if he'd promised her the moon. That was the thing about Lily. She made everything feel lighter, even when life was crushing him. Since her mother passed away, Daniel had done everything to keep her world steady, even when his own had fallen apart. He worked construction jobs that barely paid the bills, skipped meals to make rent, and smiled through exhaustion because he didn't want her to see his pain. That morning, he walked her to school, then stopped by a small cafe nearby, a place where he could warm his hands and pretend he wasn't invisible to the world. He bought the cheapest coffee on the menu, found a corner seat, and took out the classified ads. Rain began to fall outside, tapping softly against the window. He could feel the tiredness in his bones, the weight of all the years that hadn't gone his way. His hands were rough, his jacket threadbare, but there was still a quiet dignity in him. He had learned to live with less and love harder. Lily sat beside him after school hours, coloring on a napkin with a borrowed pen from the counter. The cafe staff knew them by now, kind people who sometimes slipped her an extra cookie when the manager wasn't watching. For Daniel, these moments were peace, a small refuge from the storm outside. And that's when she walked in. A woman in heels, her steps confident yet graceful, her presence immediately commanding attention. She shook off her umbrella, her dark hair glistening with raindrops. Her cream suit fit her perfectly, the kind of clothes that said success, the kind Daniel only saw in glossy magazines. She spoke softly to the barista, her voice calm but warm. Daniel didn't look twice. He was used to people like her passing through. People who belonged to another world. But fate, as always, had other plans. When she turned toward the corner where he sat, her eyes caught something, someone, that made her still completely. The napkin fell from her fingers. Her breath caught in her throat. Daniel looked up just then, and for a second, his heart forgot how to beat. "Elena," she blinked, almost in disbelief. Daniel, the sound of his name in her voice, the voice he hadn't heard in nearly a decade, brought a flood of memories he'd tried to bury. Midnight walks, shared dreams, that one fight that tore them apart. He stood slowly, his chair scraping the floor. You look different," she finished softly. "Yeah," he said with a faint smile. "You do." She smiled back, but there was sadness behind it. "It's been a long time." "About 10 years, he replied, glancing at Lily. The little girl looked up from her napkin. "Daddy, who's she?" Daniel hesitated. "An old friend, sweetheart." Elena's eyes softened at that word, friend. Once, they had been everything but just friends. Elena knelt down, her heart twisting as she saw the little girl's curious face. "You're beautiful," she whispered. "Thank you," Lily said shyly. "Daddy made my hair like this." Something inside Elena broke at that. This image of Daniel as a father, gentle and loving. He looked exhausted, but the love in his eyes was unmistakable. They sat together. Conversation came hesitantly at first, like stepping through fragile glass. She asked about his life, and he gave careful answers, about the jobs, the rent, the long nights. About losing his wife, about how he'd never expected to raise a child alone. Elena listened, her throat tight. She had climbed every mountain the world offered her. Money, recognition, success, but none of it had filled the silence that came at night. None of it had erased the image of the man she left behind. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, fingers tightening around her cup. He looked up, confused. For what? For leaving the way I did, she said. I thought I was doing the right thing. My father's company was going bankrupt. There were deals, people, I didn't have a choice. Daniel's jaw tightened. You always had a choice, Elena. Her eyes filled with unshed tears. Maybe I did, but back then, I didn't see another way. Lily watched them both, sensing something unspoken. Daddy, she whispered, tugging his sleeve, are you sad? Daniel forced a smile. No, baby, I'm just remembering. Elena smiled faintly, brushing a tear from her cheek. You have a wonderful daughter, Daniel. She's lucky. He looked at Lily. I'm the lucky one. They talked a little longer, about nothing and everything. But when it was time for her to go, the silence stretched again, filled with all the words they didn't say. Elena reached into her purse and pulled out a sleek white business card. She placed it on the table beside his hand. If you ever need anything, call me, she said softly. Daniel looked down at it. You're a CEO now. She gave a small, almost embarrassed laugh. Yeah, life got busy. Seems like it turned out pretty well for you, he said, his tone gentle but distant. Not as well as I thought it would, she replied quietly. He didn't know how to respond to that, so he didn't. Elena stood, hesitated for a moment, then said, take care of yourself, Daniel. And of her, he nodded, always. As she walked out into the rain, her reflection blurred against the glass, disappearing into the gray. Daniel sat there for a long time, staring at the card she'd left. Her name embossed in gold letters. Elena Carter, CEO, Carter Holdings. He turned it over in his hand, then slipped it into his pocket, not because he planned to use it, but because it felt like holding a piece of the past. That night, as Lily slept beside him, Daniel sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker through the rain. Somewhere out there, Elena was probably sitting in her penthouse, surrounded by everything she'd ever wanted. And yet, he wondered if she felt the same quiet ache he did. Neither of them knew that this accidental encounter, born in a cafe on a rainy afternoon, would change everything again. Because sometimes, love doesn't disappear. It just waits, until life gives it a second chance. Hook. He told himself he'd never need her help. He'd already lost his pride once when she left, he wouldn't lose it again. But when the notice came pinned to his apartment door and his daughter's shoes had holes in them, Daniel knew he couldn't pretend anymore. The card with Elena's name burned in his pocket like a promise he'd sworn he'd never use, until that morning when he finally dialed her number, unaware that one call would change both their lives forever. The sun hadn't even risen when Daniel woke to the sound of dripping water. Another leak, another problem. He grabbed a bucket and set it under the crack in the ceiling, sighing as he looked around the small, dim apartment. Paint peeling, bills stacked on the counter, Lily's tiny shoes by the door, patched again with tape. He rubbed his face, the fatigue of too many lost nights weighing him down. The construction company he'd worked for had suddenly closed 2 days ago, leaving everyone without pay. He'd spent the last 48 hours searching every job listing in the city, calling old coworkers, walking miles between sites, no luck. Lily stirred in her bed, the soft hum of her voice breaking the silence. Daddy, it's morning already. Yeah, sweetheart, he said, forcing a smile. You go back to sleep for a bit. Daddy's got some calls to make. He looked at his phone screen, empty of messages, empty of hope. Then his eyes fell on the white business card tucked beside his wallet. Elena Carter, CEO. The memory of her soft voice filled his mind again. If you ever need anything. He clenched his jaw. He couldn't ask her for help. Not her. Not after the way they ended. But then he thought of Lily's small hands clutching her lunchbox, her smile when she said she wanted to be a teacher someday. By the time the clock hit 9, he was holding his phone, thumb hovering over her number. His heart raced like he was 20 again. He pressed call. It rang once, twice. Then, hello. That voice. Calm, elegant, familiar. Elena. It's Daniel. There was a pause, just long enough for her to catch her breath. Daniel. I didn't expect to hear from you. I'm sorry to call out of nowhere. I was wondering if you knew anyone hiring. Construction, repairs, anything really. Her tone softened immediately. You don't need to apologize. Can you come to my office this morning? I might have something. He hesitated. Your office? I don't want to bother you. You're not bothering me, she said gently. Please, Daniel. He exhaled. All right. An hour later, Daniel stood in the gleaming lobby of Carter Holdings, his worn jacket looking completely out of place among polished marble floors and men in tailored suits. The receptionist smiled politely, though her eyes lingered on the tear near his sleeve. Mr. Daniels, Ms. Carter will see you now. Alina's office was on the top floor, surrounded by glass walls overlooking the skyline. She stood by the window when he walked in, sunlight catching her hair. She turned, her expression softening the moment she saw him. You came, she said. Didn't think I'd fit in a place like this, he said with a wry smile. You fit better than you think, she replied, gesturing for him to sit. He remained standing. Elena, I don't want charity. Just work. I can handle repairs, renovations, anything with my hands. I know, she said. And I trust you more than anyone else for that. We're restoring some old housing units outside the city. The project manager quit last week. He blinked. You want me to run it? She smiled faintly. I want you to build it. He opened his mouth to protest, but she raised a hand. It's not pity, Daniel. It's business. You're good at what you do. And I need someone I can rely on. Her tone left no room for argument. He nodded slowly. All right, but I'll earn every cent. I know you will, she whispered. Weeks passed. Daniel threw himself into the work. Early mornings, late nights, rebuilding crumbling walls and tired foundations. He led his crew with quiet strength, teaching younger workers, fixing what others thought was beyond saving. Elena visited often, clipboard in hand, but her eyes always found him first. Sometimes she brought Lily hot chocolate, or stayed late just to talk as the sun went down. Slowly, their conversations grew warmer, easier, less about blueprints and more about life. One evening, after everyone had gone, they stood side by side on the rooftop of the unfinished building. The city stretched below them, lights flickering like stars. It's beautiful up here, she said. He nodded. You can almost forget everything that went wrong down there. She turned to him. Do you regret it, Daniel? How things ended? He hesitated, eyes fixed on the horizon. For a long time, yeah. I thought you chose money over me. But, maybe we both did what we thought we had to. Her voice trembled. I thought if I could save my family, I'd feel whole again. But I lost you, and nothing ever filled that space. Silence hung between them, heavy and fragile. Then she reached out, fingers brushing his hand. He didn't pull away. Maybe, he said quietly, we get another chance. She smiled through tears. Maybe we do. But the world doesn't stay quiet for long. A week later, Alina's assistant rushed into her office holding a magazine. Ma'am, you need to see this. The headline screamed across the page. Millionaire CEO and construction worker lover. Carter Holdings in scandal. Photos of them together, on site, at the cafe, her hand brushing his arm, filled the spread. The board was furious. Investors demanded explanations. Rumors spread fast, cruelly painting Daniel as a desperate single dad chasing her money. That evening, Daniel stormed into her office, eyes filled with anger and guilt. You need to fix this, Elena. Tell them it's not true. Tell them it was all business. She stood up. Daniel, I'm not ashamed of us. He shook his head. You could lose everything. Your company. I can rebuild a company, she said firmly, stepping closer. But I can't rebuild you if I lose you again. Tears welled in his eyes. I don't want to be the reason you fall. You're the reason I stand, she whispered. You always were. The weeks that followed were hard. She faced press conferences with dignity, stood before her board with unflinching resolve, and told the truth. She loved him. The scandal slowly died, replaced by admiration for her honesty. Her investors, once cold, began to see her as more than a headline. And Daniel, he stayed, quietly supporting her, refusing to let fear win. Months later, the project they worked on together finally opened, a housing community for single parents. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, Lily stood between them, holding both their hands. The crowd applauded, cameras flashed, but Elena didn't care about any of it. She looked at Daniel and smiled. "We built something beautiful, didn't we?" He nodded, eyes glistening. "You and me, we always did." That night, they went back to the same cafe where it all began. The rain tapped softly against the window, the world outside glimmering in reflection. Lily laughed as Daniel and Elena shared a quiet look, the kind that carried 1,000 memories. The barista smiled as she brought their drinks. "You three look happy together." Elena laughed softly. "We had to fight for it." Daniel squeezed her hand. "Some fights are worth every bruise." And as rain fell again, washing the streets clean, it felt like fate had come full circle, two hearts that once broke apart now beating as one, rebuilding not just buildings, but a life. Because love, when it's real, doesn't fade with time. It waits, until both hearts are finally ready to come home.